He does not want the truth out, friends. And it's no different today, because you see, Satan has a short period of time, and he's angry, and he's running around like a roaring lion seeking to devour someone, and he does not like this enlightenment. And so right now, he's doing everything in his power to deceive you. So you have to ask yourself, friends, where did these geniuses get their information? They're just spontaneously geniuses, or were there information available to those in the mystery schools? Yes, there was, friends. And we can prove it with this map. Now, some of you have read, books like The Chariots of the Gods by von Däniken, and Velenkowski has some books and different, books that were popular in the 80s and so forth. And you probably found out a lot of interesting stuff back then, but it was just mystery, like the lines at Nazca, Peru. Right? There's these rocks all over the ground down there, and certain areas that look like they're dug into the earth like trenches. And when you're standing on the ground, it just looks like rocks, no big deal. You got to get up into the air, as if you're in an airplane or even higher, to notice that all of these rocks and trenches in the ground, these lines that are in the ground, make the shapes of animals and various symbols and signs. And so you have to ask yourself, why would they make art, if that's what this is, just art, just for people who were above the earth when no one could ever go above the earth? They didn't have airplanes. Why would you do a painting, right, and then stick it in a dark room and lock the door and throw away the key so that no one could ever see the painting, and then forget it for eternity? There wouldn't be any purpose in going through all the elaborate work that it takes to make such lines and pictures and symbols, only to be viewed by the air when no one could see them by the air, because no one could go in the air in those days. And, of course, many of you have done research and some study about the pyramids and certain things like the stone at Baalbek. In one of my videos, I explain how that large stone there at Baalbek is so large, it's completely unbelievable, and it's totally impossible for human beings to put a stone and carve it and set it there that would weigh that much. None of the equipment that we have today, no crane in modern times or tractor or any other kind of machine, could lift that rock today. And yet those primitive people supposedly carved this rock out of stone and laid it there in Lebanon. And it's still there to this day. And we talked about how that rock was used for a landing pad for interstellar ships that landed on the Earth, and how they used the Great Pyramid as a honing beacon to find that landing pad. And they used Mount Ararat in the north to line it up. But that's what that was used for. Now, a lot of you are thinking, well, that's just ridiculous, Dave. It's interesting, but it's unverified. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, that's not true. This has all been documented. You've never read the Sumerian tablets in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, in the Ugaritic texts. You've never read the ancient history because you've never been allowed to do so. But it explains in these ancient writings, which were histories of our ancient past. It tells you what all this was for. And yet we're running around going, I wonder what the pyramids are for. I wonder what this stone here in Baalbek was for. It's so huge, but oh well, I guess these primitive peoples just drug it over here with rope. Right? They're just, it's amazing how they got it lined up with the star Sirius and the constellation Orion. And they've got this astrological charts, and they knew more about the stars than we did. But hey, it's just mystery, right? I'm just pointing out that this stone is so large, nobody could have carved it and laid it there without highly advanced equipment. The pyramids have stones that weigh many tons, and that have been carved and set together. And they say that you can't get a piece of paper in between these stones. They're set together in such perfection, and after thousands of years. Now, the pyramid at Cheops is over 13 acres at the base. It's perfectly level. A 13-acre monument, perfectly level at the base. We don't have that technology today to make a monument level, especially to stay level for thousands of years. We don't know how old the pyramid is, but those who know esoteric teachings and wisdom from the ancient manuscripts know that it's probably 10,000 years old. It has an estimated 2,300,000 stone blocks, and they weigh from 2 to 30 tons each. Some of them are over 50 tons. The pyramid of Menkaure, the pyramid of Khafre, and the pyramid of Khufu, they are precisely aligned with the constellation Orion. Get this, friends. The interior, the temperature of the pyramids inside, is exactly the same as the average temperature on the Earth, which is 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. The outer mantle, it originally had 144,000 casing stones, and they were all polished and flat, and they had an accuracy of 1/100th of an inch. The cornerstone foundation of the pyramid has a ball and socket construction capable of dealing with heat expansion and earthquakes. The mortar used is of an unknown origin. There is no explanation known to man what this mortar is. Now, it's not like they don't know what it is. They've analyzed it and they know what the chemical composition of this mortar is, but it cannot be reproduced by modern technology. It's stronger than the stone, and it's still holding up to this very day, probably 10,000 years. It was originally covered with casing stones made out of highly polished limestone. They actually reflected the sun's light, and they made the pyramid shine like a jewel. Now, see, that's the reason they did that is because it tells about it in the Sumerian tablets. They saw this pyramid shining, and it was a beacon when they landed their interstellar spacecraft on that large stone at Baalbek. They lined it up when they came into the Earth's atmosphere, and they saw Mount Ararat, and they lined that up with the pyramid. They saw it shining, and they landed there in a direct path there. Between Ararat and the pyramid is the stone at Baalbek. It aligns true north, the Great Pyramid. It's the most accurately aligned structure in existence. It faces true north, and its southern shaft of the King's Chamber points directly to the constellation Orion. And they talk about it in all of their writings there, in the Egyptian works and writings that they have there, that this was their home. This is why they built the pyramid. It's showing us where, they came from, the stars, from Orion. That was the home of the gods. And they set up a civilization here on Earth. And this is where all the ancient wisdom came from. They took Enoch with them back to the stars, to Orion. And they taught him all of this wisdom, astrology and science. He's the one that brought all of this wisdom and science and learning back to the earth. And the Bible says he walked with God. You see, and he handed this information and knowledge down, and it was put into the pyramids there in Egypt, and all this was written about and stored in the ancient wisdom there in the Alexandrian library, which was brought from the library there at Heliopolis, Egypt. The architecture is unsurpassed in modern times, and there are things that we could go on and on and on and talk about to show that there is information and knowledge and wisdom that was handed down. But here's the point. Somewhere in the Dark Ages we lost it. All this information, they had libraries just like we do today that kept track of all this stuff. Herodotus wrote about the city of Heliopolis in the library there, in the labyrinth. We know very little of it now, except for little bits and pieces that we have in history. But what I'm trying to point out is that this is what happened The Catholic Church eradicated all of this knowledge. So if you're a Christian, you're saying, well, I believe in the Catholics, and they should have eradicated them. They're all a bunch of pagans and devil worshippers. Okay, well, these devil worshippers knew about the stars, right? Your so-called devil worshippers, they had knowledge that even today mankind does not have. So why were you so quick to say that they might be devil worshippers? It all fits very well when you understand who they really were. This was the ancient wisdom that the Sumerians talk about that was handed down through Enoch and his children down to Joseph there in Egypt in Heliopolis. This is why the mystery schools thrived. And in the days of Christ, there were those who were of these mystery schools, and Jesus was a part of it in the sect of the Nazarenes, and John the Baptist was an Essene. And these were the mystery schools. And it's very hard to make that connection because it's been taken from us. The Catholic Church has tried to eradicate this knowledge from you, but it's true, and we can prove it with this information. But what I'm telling you is this information was still in the Imperial Library in Constantinople at that time. Friends, the Dark Ages were the product of the burning of these non-Christian writings. Non-Christian meaning non-Catholic writings, non-accepted writings. Writings on science, literature, engineering, mathematics. Because, you see, many of the Christian scribes who would copy the books for a living, they felt that this information was pagan, was wrong, and so they just got rid of it. But on the other hand, the Islamic world, now see, the Islamic world, they were going through an era of peace. They didn't have all of this fighting going on by the Catholic Church trying to wipe out the truth there that was being preserved by the knights and the mystery schools and the Cathars that were, you know, trying so hard to preserve all of this. But there in the Islamic world, they did not do like they did there in the Dark Ages with the Christians. They actually preserved many of the works that Christians destroyed. So probably a lot of these writings found their way also in the Imperial Library because there were certain individuals preserving these writings. So up until the establishment of the Catholic Church, the pre-Constantine Church did not do any of the burnings or the destruction of the classical works. And so the early church leaders were favorable to these classical works. And if you go back to, say, Justin Martyr and Clement of Alexandria, see, they had access at that point to the Alexandrian Library. This is before 295. And in those days, the Christians, okay, of course, they weren't Catholics at that point. They were true Christians, Gnostic and philosophical, and they're very different in tone. And they accepted and upheld the value and the positive value of that Greek philosophy that thrived in those days. So Justin, Clement, Irenaeus, Tertullian, they used these texts. And during the 4th century, most of the creative and talented people of that empire, they were drawn to Christianity. They were educated upper-class Romans. They joined the church in large numbers because it was libertarian and full of truth and enlightenment. So if you go back to, say, like 200 AD, there were a lot of Christian libraries. There were certain church fathers and certain people we consider Christian. Of course, this was before Constantine. They were true Christians. They were not under these council and edicts of Milan and so forth after Constantine. So there was the Library of Origen and Pamphilus, which is known to have been, it had all these philosophical and classical texts, and that library was used by Eusebius in, I think, in the 2nd century. In around 212, Pope Alexander founded a similar library in Jerusalem, and it also contained classical works.